The Road Through Cursed America, Part 1. I don't expect you to believe this story because even the ones who lived it had trouble believing it themselves. And yet every detail has stayed with them like a shadow that refuses to let go. It wasn't my journey. I wasn't there. But I heard it told, and I can't shake the feeling that once a story like this enters your mind, it never really leaves. 4 friends, 1 car, 1 idea, to drive across America and visit the most haunted places they could find, chasing danger, chasing thrill, chasing content for the cameras. But what they found on the road followed them long after the trip was over.
Chapter 1. Clinton Road, New Jersey. It began almost like a dare, late at night on Clinton Road, a stretch of asphalt so infamous that locals whispered about it but rarely drove it after dark. The forest pressed tight on both sides. The moon gave only thin silver light, and their laughter, nervous and shaky, seemed to vanish too quickly into the trees. Then, without warning, the cars sputtered, coughed, and died, right there on the bridge where the legend was said to live. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything they had known, the kind of silence where you realize even your own heartbeat sounds too loud. And then from somewhere beyond the railings came a noise that didn't belong. Laughter. High-pitched. Light. The unmistakable giggle of a child. It froze all 4 of them. No one dared breathe. One of them, braver than the rest, or maybe just pretending to be, pulled a coin from his pocket and said, half joking, half shaking, "Isn't this what they say? You throw a coin and the ghost kid throws it back?" The coin spun through the moonlight, dropped into the water below, and they waited, their eyes locked on the black surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a metallic clink that made their stomachs turn, the very same coin rolled across the asphalt and stopped exactly where he had been standing. Wet. Cold. Impossible. And not one of them laughed again.
Chapter 2. Centralia, Pennsylvania. Morning brought no relief. They drove into Centralia, a ghost town abandoned decades ago when the ground beneath it caught fire and never stopped burning. The streets were broken, gaping with cracks that breathed out white smoke, as if the earth itself was alive and wounded. The air tasted of ash and metal. They walked slowly, their cameras pointed at the emptiness, but the silence of the place was unlike anything they had ever known. No birds, no dogs, no signs of life, just the faint hiss of fire that had eaten the town from below. And then they found it. On the cracked asphalt lay a child's drawing. Simple lines scratched in colored chalk. A crooked little house, a sun with bright rays, a smiling stick figure. But the colors were still fresh. The chalk was still soft. Someone had drawn it not long ago. They stared at it, confused, unsettled. And then one of them tilted his head sharply, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" he asked. The others shook their heads. But he insisted he had heard it. A voice, faint and muffled, whispering his name. Not from the abandoned houses, not from the streets, but from below. From deep inside the earth. His face drained of color. His steps stumbled back from the cracks. And though the others tried to laugh it off, something in his eyes told the truth. Whatever lived under Centralia had called him personally. and it knew who he was.
Chapter 3. Waverly Hills Sanatorium, Kentucky. By the time night fell again, their nerves were raw, and the Waverly Hills Sanatorium was the last place they should have gone. The building loomed like a skeleton on the hill, its broken windows staring down like empty sockets, and the moment they stepped inside, the air felt heavy, damp, and wrong. Dust clung to the beam of their flashlights. Every footstep echoed too loud against the endless corridors, and it seemed like the walls themselves were listening. Then they came to the tunnel the workers once called the body chute, where the dead were carried out of the hospital and into the world outside. Empty now. Silent. Until it wasn't. From deep within the tunnel came footsteps. Slow, steady, measured, coming closer. Every muscle in their bodies locked, every light shaking in trembling hands, and when they shone their beams into the dark, there was nothing. No figure, no source, no explanation. Only the echo of steps that should not have been there. One of the girls turned sharply, her voice breaking as she gasped because she had seen it. Just for a second, at the edge of her light, what looked like a man in a hospital gown, standing perfectly still by a window. But when the flashlight found the spot, there was nothing at all. And the camera, still recording, picked up something else instead. A whisper, faint but clear, so close it sounded as if it had been breathed directly into the microphone. Don't leave. 2 words, cold, sharp. Not a warning, not a threat, but a promise.
Part 2. Narration version. I told you before, this isn't my story, and yet it feels like it's burned into my memory, as if I had lived it myself. Because once you hear it, once you carry it, it doesn't really let you go. 4 friends went out chasing shadows across America, and by the time they reached the final stops of their journey, the laughter was gone, replaced by something that clung to them like frost in their lungs. Chapter 4. Winchester Mystery House, California. When they finally stood before the Winchester Mystery House, it already felt less like a tourist attraction and more like a trap, a place built not for the living, but for something else entirely. The house rose in strange angles, a labyrinth of stairways that led into ceilings and doors that opened into walls, a place designed to confuse whatever was hunting the woman who built it, and perhaps to confuse the living who dared to enter as well. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with the scent of wood and dust, and though it was daylight outside, within those twisting halls it felt like night had settled early. They wandered slowly, whispering, as though afraid to wake the walls themselves, and eventually they found a door marked with an old warning, its frame corroded with rust, its hinges stiff with time. One of them forced it open, and the house exhaled. The room beyond smelled sharply of gunpowder, the acrid scent clinging to the air like an old wound that never healed, as though a shot fired decades ago had somehow lingered inside the wood and refused to fade. As they stepped across the threshold, a sudden sound shattered the silence. Banging, hard, relentless. The very door they had pushed open now shook violently, as if something or someone was trapped inside and desperate to get out. The walls trembled, fists pounded from nowhere,
and the air filled with the furious rhythm of something demanding release. Then, one of them collapsed, his body folding to the floor as though the strength had been drained out of him all at once. When he finally came to, his face was pale, his lips dry, his eyes unfocused, and he whispered what he had seen. Not a single figure, not even a few, but hundreds of faces pressed against the walls, peering through from the other side, their expressions twisted in a way he could barely describe. They were smiling as if they had been waiting for him, watching through the wood and plaster, ready to welcome him into their crowd.
Chapter 5. Stull Cemetery, Kansas. The last place on their list was Kansas, and even before they reached it, they knew this stop would be different. The name carried weight: Stull Cemetery. The locals kept their warnings brief. "Don't stay after midnight," they said, and their eyes showed more than fear. There was resignation there, like people who had already lost too much. But the group stayed. At first, the cemetery felt like nothing more than another graveyard. Old stones leaning into the weeds, trees bending with age, and the ruined remains of a church that stood crooked and skeletal against the horizon. But as the hours slipped toward midnight, something strange began to settle over the land. The air cooled, the breeze died, and the silence grew until it wasn't silence anymore. It was the absence of sound itself, the kind of void that makes you doubt you'll ever hear again. Then midnight came, and in that frozen moment, all four of them stopped moving, their flashlights trembling in their hands, their faces slowly turning in the same direction as though something invisible had taken hold of them and was guiding their gaze. The ruins, the church, the ground beneath it. From the shadows there, something began to rise. At first, it was only a shape. Then it stretched. Then it grew. Higher than the stones, taller than the trees. A darkness that unfolded itself against the sky like a giant waking after centuries of sleep. And it spoke, not in a language of strangers, but in their own names. One by one, it called them, and one by one they answered, their voices hollow, distorted, no longer their own. The last one left was the storyteller himself, the only one who ran. He bolted through the graves, stumbling against crooked stones, the silence broken only by the thudding of his heart, and behind him came the sound of footsteps, not rushing, not desperate, steady, patient, certain. He made it out. At least, his body did. But the others never followed, and to this day, he swears they are still there, not alive, not dead, not human, but bound to whatever rose from beneath that broken church. Their voices twisted into something unrecognizable. He says he hears them sometimes, outside his window, in the cracks of his dreams, calling his name the way that shadow did, steady and endless. And he knows that one day, no matter how far he runs, the road will come for him again. The end. So now you've heard it. Not my story, not my truth, but theirs. And maybe yours too. Because once you walk the road through cursed America, you don't really leave it behind. You take it with you, inside you, in the silence between words and the shadows that wait in the corner of every room. And when the night grows too quiet, even your own breath feels stolen from you. Listen carefully, because you might hear the same words they did. Don't
leave.